Jeni Smith is a medical student who credits Toastmasters for her acceptance into medical school. Speech contests are one of her favorite Toastmasters experiences, whether participating or supporting her fellow club members. Most recently, she placed in the top 3 in the District 106 evaluation and international speech contests. Tonight, she is here to share some tips on how to use body language and gestures to win over your audience. Please welcome Jeni Smith with It's All in the Delivery.
Thank you, Toastmaster Jim. Can y'all see my screen share? Excellent. Well, the time has come. Who here has been to a speech contest? Raise your hand. All right, wonderful. How many of you have seen or heard a speech with just fantastic content, wonderful story, compelling, but it just didn't win? Or on the flip side, have you ever seen a speech that maybe didn't have the best story, but the delivery was full of pizzazz, enough to bring that speech into first place? Well, I'm here to share a secret with all of you. It's not just all in the story, it's all in the delivery. Today, we're going to do a very interactive, I hope to make this as interactive and fun as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about nonverbal communication, body language, and gestures, and we will finish with a 5-minute Q&A. Be prepared to speak. If nobody speaks, I will pick on you. And be prepared to ask some questions and maybe think of some feedback or maybe some tips that you've learned yourself, and I'll invite y'all to share at the very end. First of all, there we go. First of all, why is nonverbal communication important? A question for all of you. Maybe I'll pick on 1 or 2 people. How has Toastmasters helped you improve your nonverbal communication? Let's hear from maybe 1 or 2 people. Go ahead and shout out the answer.
Zoom.
Yes, Zoom, perfect. Who else wants to speak?
Evaluators have pointed out fidgety things that I didn't realize I was doing.
Oh yes, nervous gestures, recognizing nervous gestures is going to be part of this workshop. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you both for sharing. Now, the Toastmasters philosophy. Body language can help speakers gain confidence, increase their influence over the audience, and become better presenters and more professional. There is nothing more satisfying than being seen as a credible professional speaker. There's a lot of projects in the pathways. For instance, on the left, you can see all the different pathways projects. And there's a lot of wonderful free resources on the Toastmasters International website. They're all in the outline that I sent, and I'll send the outline again at the very end. And one of those is actually from D106's own Diane Windingland. I adapted some of the content from these TI website resources, and I hope you all find them useful and a good read later on. Now, this is a contest mastery club, so I'm going to talk a little bit about speech contests. Contest speeches are not just judged on the content. Whoops. Delivery counts for 30% of the total score. As you can see from the humorous contest ballot, you can see that 30% of the judging is based on your physical appearance, your voice, your mannerisms. And then the international contest ballot does the same. 30% of the judging is based on your physical appearance, your speaking area, your body language, your voice, and of course, your manner. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get those free points, those low-hanging pieces of fruit in some of those categories. With this in mind, I'm going to talk about how to leverage your body language and gestures to create a memorable speech that impacts your audience. First, making connections with body language. You need to connect with your audience before you can do anything else. I'm going to talk a bit about some strategies to make that immediate connection with your audience. I'm going to talk about noise and how to eliminate it, and how to read your audience. first and foremost, this is one weird old trick. People hate this tip. A smile is the best way to connect with your audience. Smiling actually has an effect on the nervous system. It increases those happy chemicals in the brain. It makes the speakers appear more confident and enthusiastic. If they're confident and enthusiastic, it'll make the audience enthusiastic. A smile is infectious. And those social smiles, we've been socially smiling since we were 2 months old. We were building connections with them. I included a picture of the 2018 world champion of public speaking, Jeni Smith. And in her YouTube video, you can see her smiling as she walks out onto that stage. Some tips: smile from your eyes, not just your mouth. People can tell when you're smiling genuinely. And be very, very careful to only smile if the topic is positive, neutral, or technical. You do not want to be smiling when you're delivering bad news. Next, eye contact. That's the second tip for connecting with your audience. The leadership gaze is something that Toastmasters talked about. It's not possible over Zoom, but if you're in an in-person audience, focus on each person when making a single point, then move to the next person when you move to the next main idea. Also, I included this picture to help you think of your audience as birds. Your audience, the birds, love the breadcrumbs, that eye contact. If you're in a small crowd, it's very easy to look at each person in your audience and give them each a scattering of breadcrumbs. If you're in a larger crowd, it's okay to divide the crowd into sections and then look at each section when you're making a different point. And some considerations for Zoom. You want the camera to be at eye level, so you're looking directly at your audience. You don't want the audience to look up your nose or down at the top of your head. If you're using a dual monitor, do be careful. I had a psychiatry instructor who had 2 monitors. He looked at this other monitor when he was speaking, and it looked like he wasn't speaking to us. Be sure you're looking at the right camera. Another thing, look at the camera and not the screen. People can tell when you're looking down. Sometimes it helps to put a visual cue near the camera. And a tip from one of your fellow Toastmasters who won a district speech contest: if you have notes, you can put notes or the video of yourself speaking directly below the camera, so that way it looks somewhat like you're looking at the camera. Your audience won't be able to tell the difference. All right, anyone else have any other pointers? Anything that they've learned from their Zoom experiences? Go ahead and just speak up.
Lighting.
One thing you shouldn't do is to look at the audience and flit around your eyes too quickly. You know, you have to focus. And I've heard the guideline at least 3 seconds in any direction before you change your eye focus. Otherwise, the people feel like you're not really looking at them. But also, don't stare at the audience in one spot for too long, or it'll get creepy.
That was Earl. That's a very excellent, Earl. I like that suggestion. I didn't know that about the 3 seconds. Yes, fluttering your eyes back and forward can actually make you look nervous to your audience. And that's a great segue into something I want to talk about: noise. Does anyone else have any other pointers or considerations for Zoom?
Hi, this is Arun. I would like to say that be careful about the lighting and make sure that your face is clear, not half dark.
Yes, lighting is good. And for those of us who are glasses wearers, make sure that you're in a room that minimizes or eliminates that reflection off of your glasses. So either use an overhead light or maybe a light covered with a sheet. Those are great pointers and suggestions. Thank you for sharing. And now, what is noise? When you are gesturing, every movement should be purposeful and meaningful. Sometimes we have nervous gestures that are unconscious and they're purposeless. Some consider them a form of self-soothing when we're nervous. They can involve one part of the body or many. All of us have them, even professional speakers do, and oftentimes we're unaware that we have them. Now, what are some nervous gestures that you've had? And I'll share mine. Mine was gripping the lectern.
Mine is fluffing my hair back sometimes without realizing it.
Oh yeah, hair is a big one. Anyone else want to
Twiddling
share?
my thumbs.
Twiddling your thumbs. It's a good one. Anyone else?
Placing any finger near around your nose.
Oh, yep, the nose and the mouth touching your face. One more.
I'm a hand talker, so those hands they can just be flapping like I'm gonna take off.
Oh yes, the hand talking, the meaningless hand gestures. You got a lot of them, and there's some new ones in there as well. Gripping the lectern, close, swaying back and forth. I'm not going to go through all of these for the sake of time, but they can just involve any part of the body and even things outside of the body. In your outline, I actually included an example of a nervous gesture in a professional TED talker who spent the entire 20-minute speech shifting back and forth. And I invite you to watch that when you're in your spare time. It's a very interesting speech, but if you notice, he is making that nervous gesture throughout his entire talk. Now, how do you get rid of those nervous gestures? Well, the first thing to do is recognize what your nervous gestures are. In Toastmasters, it's a great strategy to ask a mentor or another club member to watch for them, and then they can observe and evaluate you. It also helps to evaluate other speakers, and speech contests are a great way to do that. Also, visiting other clubs. Another tip is to record yourself giving your speech, and I invite you to turn the volume off. That way you can tell, are your gestures congruent with your speech content or not? Also, reducing nervousness is the best way to reduce nervous gestures. Smiling tricks your brain, taking those deep breaths before speaking. That actually slows your heart rate down. The Wonder Woman pose, that has anecdotal evidence, but if it works for you, definitely use it. Now, some tips from your fellow Toastmasters. You can mingle with your audience beforehand because that familiarity breeds less nervousness. One person said, rehearse the speech from the end first, because some people start off at the beginning, they know exactly what they're going to say. Then in the middle and end of their speech, they start to lose some of that energy. Also, reframe it. Instead of being nervous and thinking, oh, am I going to win? Am I going to win this contest? Think, I am excited. I get to share my story with others. And finally, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Now, what are some signs, maybe 2 or 3 people, what are some signs that your audience is interested in your speech?
Audible laughter.
Yes, audible laughter. What else?
Mimicking body language. So you're smiling, so they're smiling, or you make a gesture and they make a gesture.
Mm-hmm. Yep, somebody posted something in the chat. They're not looking at their phone. And Sherry mentioned for nervous gestures, flipping their pens, clicking their pens, leaning forward. Good one, Dot. That's a great form of open body language.
Eye contact.
Yes, eye contact. That's a great one. And now on the flip side, what are some signs that your audience is not interested in your speech? These may be the opposite.
Hanging their head.
Yeah, hanging their head.
Eyes darting around the room.
Whispering. Dot said whispering. Craig's camera off. Huh. That might be one.
Looking at their watch.
Looking at their watch.
Phone.
Yes. Looking at their watch or their phone.
Touching their face.
Yeah. Their faces might be kind of skeptical. Folding their arms is one.
And sometimes even yawning.
Yawning, yes, absolutely. So I think you've all gotten a good grasp of closed versus open body language. So just think closed, you're not receptive to what the speaker has to say. They're diverting their attention to something else. Whereas when they're open, they're leaning forward, they're looking at you, they're making eye contact, and they're giving you their undivided attention. And one of you mentioned laughing with the speaker, and that's a great one. If they're mimicking your language and facial expression and laughing with them, you got them hooked. Excellent input, all of you. So in summary for part 2, you can use a smile and an eye contact to make that connection. It's good to recognize your nervous gestures so you can eliminate them. And you can use closed versus open body language to make sure your audience is engaged. Now, part 3, how do you take that speech to the next level using body language? There was a study done in 2010 on the first 7 seconds of TED Talk videos. Vanessa Van Edwards had 760 people watch only the first few seconds, and then these volunteers rated their speakers on their charisma and likability. And interestingly enough, people with the higher number of meaningful gestures, not gestures in general, but meaningful gestures, got higher likability ratings. And also vocal variety. But the funny thing is, ratings did not change between groups when they watched muted versus videos with the sound on. So that connection with your audience and creating meaningful and memorable gestures are crucial. Now, I'm going to use Verity Price, the 2021 World Champion of Public Speaking, to talk about first impressions. First impressions, I know you're all wondering, what does the Zoom background, what do your clothes have to do with body language? Well, they can either enhance your body language, make you pop, or they can actually mask your body language and camouflage you. So first, think about your speaking area. You want all of your gestures to be visible, and I'm probably not a good example of this, but as you can see, she has her torso and part of her arms visible because she's using a lot of arm gestures. It's always good to make sure that your entire gestures are in the screen, because one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I always hear in Toastmasters is, you had great gestures, but I just couldn't see them. Now, for academic or scholarly presentations, it's okay to do the bust up, so the shoulders, the neck, and the head. And also be very mindful if there's a podium or a lectern, because that can actually block people's view of you. And you want there to be no barriers between yourself or the audience, or as few barriers as possible. As you can see here, Verity Price does a good job of keeping herself in the screen and making sure that her gestures are visible from all sides. And now the background. A blank wall or a green screen is best, and you can see she has the white background. I saw some of you using a blur tool in the background or using a curtain. If some of you can't control what your background looks like, you can always hang up a curtain or a bed sheet or a green screen. I know Amazon sells green screens. And also, if your background is patterned, consider solid color clothing, particularly in a complementary color. So she is wearing a black jacket, and that contrasts with the white or the light gray background very nicely. Because if you have, say, or if your clothing has a really busy pattern on it and your background has a really busy pattern on it, that background can actually camouflage you and make you less visible. And then for attire, if in doubt, business casual, professional work best. You can definitely wear something that reflects your personality, but just be mindful of how it fits in the context of your frame and your background. You want your outfit to pop, and you want all of your gestures and body language to be visible. And she's actually doing a really good job with keeping the pattern not very busy. She's got the feathers on her blouse. It's not a very busy pattern, but it reflects her personality very well. Now, your speech begins. This can be for a contest, this can be for a professional speech, any sort of Toastmaster speech. Your speech begins when you enter the speaking area. When you enter, make sure your area is set up, because we don't want you fiddling with your technology, jiggling things. Remember to smile. When you stand solidly with your feet shoulder width apart and make yourself excited. It's great, you're privileged to be here. Now this is Zoom, so handshakes might not be as relevant, but when we're going back to real life Toastmasters meetings or live Toastmasters meetings, always make eye contact with the person who's shaking your hand. Smile at them and face them. Show them that you're interested in shaking hands with them. Then wait until your Toastmaster leaves before you begin with the speech. They say in my home club, never leave your lectern unattended. And finally, before you begin, take a pause. You don't necessarily need to begin your speech right away. Keep smiling and keep your head up. I actually got dinged a couple times in an evaluation because I had my head down before giving my contest speech. Just allow the audience to prepare for the speech that you're giving. Your stage position is a great way of telling a story. Some people like to do stage left, stage center, and stage right as they take the audience through time. When they go to stage left, or stage right, excuse me, stage right is their audience is left. I was a young kid. Then I became a teenager. And then I became an adult. You're taking the audience left and right through time. Sometimes people shrink backwards, and that can symbolize despair. That can symbolize more negative emotions. And when you get closer to the audience, you are triumphant. You want the audience to share that joy with you. Use your position on stage to help tell your story. And also on Zoom, I'll give you a secret. You can lean in for a more intimate experience. I think I saw a couple of you do that in the international contest last spring. There's another thing called resolute stance, where you want to change the position on stage only when it serves you. Stand with your feet shoulder width apart and try not to pace too much. A lot of motivational speakers, they tend to pace back and forth on the stage, and that becomes very distracting to the audience. Only change when it's meaningful to the story. All right, and now a little bit of an interactive session. I don't know if we're able to do this on Zoom because there's so many people. I might pick on one of you. Jim, I'm gonna pick on you, Mr. Toastmaster. Pick an emotion and act it out for us without telling us what emotion it is. And all of you watch Jim and see if you can guess what emotion he's conveying.
I don't know what to do. What? I don't know what to do.
What do y'all think he's doing?
Late and frustrated.
Yeah.
I was thinking confused.
Confusion's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so why did you think confused?
He had this shrugging gesture like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. And was that Rochelle, right?
Yep.
Was that you?
Yes.
All right,
Yep.
Rochelle, I'm going to pick on you now and have
Ooh.
you act out an emotion. And then that will have the audience guess what you were feeling.
Sad.
Yeah, who said that? Oh, was that Vicky?
Vicky.
Yep.
Yeah, so tell us why you said sad.
She looked like she was crying.
Absolutely.
Her lip was coming out.
Yeah. We have a lot of great actors in our club. You guys all did both of you did a wonderful job when I put you on the spot. And all of you did a great job of guessing the emotion as well. So you can use this to your advantage. Body language is a great way to convey an emotion. And word of caution, sometimes you want to be more subtle. If you're doing a humorous speech, definitely amp up that confused. I was so confused, or I was so sad. But if you're doing a more international speech or a serious topic, you might want to be a little bit more subtle. So read the audience and read the room and see when would it be appropriate to be more overt versus subtle. Then also you can play a character. So I'm not gonna, for the sake of time, I won't ask the question, but think of some character traits that you can portray through body language. You can portray their age, a hunchbacked old lady. You can do a very powerful monarch, a king or a queen. You do a very grumpy CEO. And also, for extra emphasis, you can place your characters on a stage, but remember what areas they're in. I actually had a drama teacher who got on my case because I did a monologue and I completely forgot where my Romeo was, and I walked right through him. Juliet, me, walked through Romeo. I caught a lot of grief for that one. And now ending your speech. When you conclude, remember to pause. Oh, and Vicky mentioned pretend to be a confident speaker. I like that. When you're concluding your speech, pause. Wait for a second or two, and then finally say, fellow Toastmasters, or contest chair. After your conclusion, be sure to smile and maintain that eye contact, and don't look down at your feet. Remember to keep maintaining that eye contact with your audience and keep that stance with feet shoulder width apart. When you leave the stage, do not leave the lectern unattended. Instead, take a strong handshake with the Toastmaster. Once the Toastmaster has the lectern, you can walk purposefully off the stage and take a deep breath. You did it. You got your speech. So remember, your speech always begins when you walk onto stage for the first time, and you can use first impressions to really make a good impression. You can use your stage position to convey an emotion or walk through stages in time and even portray characters. You can use body language to portray characters and also convey emotion. But remember, your speech does not end until you walk off the stage. And finally, use gestures to enhance your speech. I got about 5 minutes, so I'll plow right through this. We gesture to emphasize. We gesture because it grabs your audience's attention, grabs your attention. And it serves as a memory tool for your audience. It also helps us remember what the content of our speech is. There's 2 types of gestures. One is the beat gesture that a lot of us might be doing right now, spontaneous and unplanned, and it just helps us match the rhythm of our speech. I'm doing a beat gesture right now, just moving my hand when I'm talking. I think Vicki mentioned that as a possible nervous gesture as well. The iconic gestures are the ones that are meaningful to our speech. We use these in our day-to-day lives, including waving goodbye, giving a thumbs up, or different things that we can put in our speeches. Now, a gesture consists of 3 parts. You have the preparation, the action, and the conclusion. The gesture should only last a few seconds and emphasize the most important points of your speech. So don't be gesturing on every single word, just the most important points. Now, maybe 2 people. What are some common mistakes you've seen with gestures?
I watched a gesture to a international audience recently where they did the head exploding as a gesture, and I just thought that that was probably not very appropriate for their professional speech.
Oh yeah, making sure your gestures are professional if you're giving a professional speech. And
one mistake I see on Zoom all the time is people gesture below the camera. So you can sort of see their fingers move up at the bottom of the screen, but you can't see their hands. So you have to be cognizant of what the camera is showing.
Yeah, that's a great one, Earl. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of common mistakes, making sure you're gesturing not above or not below the camera, but in the field of view, making sure the gestures are appropriate. Culturally appropriate is another big one. And also making sure that they match up with the content of your speech. A couple of meaningful gestures, you can use them to number. You can use you and me. This is the Disney point. They use it at Disney World, and it's portrayed as less aggressive. You can order objects, and you can be a size. I caught a walleye this big versus I caught a walleye this big. Some gesture mistakes, you can read these. Some people do meaningless gestures. Some people make their hands invisible. I'm stretching my hands out right now. You can't see it. Sometimes gestures may seem forced and insincere. And do watch out for the monster hands. This is unique to Zoom. My big, huge hands are in the field of view. And finally, not gesturing at all is the other mistake that people make. Again, you can describe an object. This object was square, triangle. It was big, little. It was heavy. You can pantomime drinking a morning cup of coffee. You can pantomime writing something down. And if people talk about being on the phone, oh, hello there. So this is, for the sake of time, we won't do this, but just think about meaningful gestures and what you've observed. And now, improving your gestures the same way as improving your nervous gestures. Plan your speech out and plan when you'll include each gesture and decide purposely what you'll make. Good to observe others in speech contests or your own club. Maybe have a mentor evaluate your gestures and record them. See if it makes sense. So remember, meaningful gestures add that extra substance to your speech and make it memorable. It's good to have spontaneous gestures once in a while, but a good Toastmaster speech, especially a contest speech, has purposeful speech or purposeful gestures. They have the preparation, the action, and the conclusion. Remember to make the gestures meaningful and avoid gesturing outside, putting your hands too close to the camera, or even not gesturing at all. And we went over some different ways to improve. That concludes the workshop portion, and we have a little bit of time for questions, answers, and if anyone else has other feedback or pointers, they are more than welcome to share. So thank you all for your attention. I will now turn it over to you for the Q&A. Yes, Jim.
One of the things that Zoom has taught me, but applies in person as well, is the size of your physical delivery needs to fit the size of your venue. If you think about standing on a large stage in a 500-seat auditorium, chances are you want to make a lot bigger gestures so the people in the back row actually see them. As you pointed out, though, Zoom accentuates depth and other things. So Zoom is a very different environment. But be aware of the size of the venue and being able to communicate visually with the people in the back row.
Yes, Jim, that's a very good one. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I have a drama background. I've done a lot of school plays as well. And people in the school plays and school musicals, they want you to gesture big. Whereas on Zoom, it's a little bit more of an intimate experience. So you can gesture a little bit smaller. But absolutely right. Once we get back to in-person speeches and speech contests, bigger is sometimes, but not always, better. Who else has questions, comments, or other pointers?
I have a question. My name is Wilhelm, and thanks for the presentation. This was really, really good resource. So one of the biggest things that I see or hear with a lot of Toastmasters and even good speakers is, how do you eliminate the arms and the soul? Or what have you done personally to eliminate that?
Oh, Wilhelm, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. And, oh, I love your comment, strong air handshake, COVID. I love that. Seasoned Toastmasters, who has suggestions on how to improve the ums and ahs or eliminate them?
This is Rocky. And the biggest thing that I've learned to do is just whenever you want to say ah or just replace it with a pause. The reason why we tend to put ahs and ums and so's in is we don't want any of that dead air. But it's great to have that dead air so people can digest what you're saying. So anytime you run into a point where you have a little break in what you're saying, or you're trying to think of what to say next, rather than saying ah and just pause, wait till your thoughts are collected, and then keep on going.
So what I'm hearing is be comfortable with the silence.
Yes.
Absolutely. Use silence as your punctuation. A lot of people will either go from one sentence to another. They'll do a run-on sentence. We did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. Simply pause. We did this. Then we did this. Then we did this. To eliminate those ands. All right. And then Dot, I saw your hand up.
Pretty much the same thing to use pauses. So is a word that is still a crutch for me, so I'm still listening. I just said it again. I'm still listening for that.
Absolutely. I think joining Toastmasters meetings as well, the ah counters do a really good job. A lot of them are very astute. They will listen in and they will hone in on those ums and ahs. And Charlotte, I see your hand is raised.
I have a question for you about glasses. So my lighting actually faces the ceiling because it gets rid of the glare. But the glare that you see on my glasses currently are from the two monitors that are in front of me. You do a fabulous job at this. How do you get rid of that?
It's a very good question. I'm still trying to navigate the glasses glare myself. Does anyone have, the only thing I can think of, I know I have the non-reflective frames, but I think not everybody has the ability to get those kinds of frames. I see some people who are wearing glasses who don't have glare.
Want to have lights off to the side so they're not pointing straight at you, so the reflections are not going to go towards the camera. And the light should be basically behind the monitor, if you think of it that way. That does work. Requires a little setup, and it's not something you'll find in most homes or offices. So, I mean, Jim gave a very good demonstration of how to do this a while back that was very effective. So if you're in a contest, you may have to buy special lights or set up special lights. When I did it at home for my contest, when I did one of the humorous contests, I brought in lights from other part of the house and set them up in the corners of my room, and that worked out pretty well.
There's a couple of other things that you can do. One is most monitors, you can turn down the brightness so that you can minimize that kind of blue light glare. And the other one is you can put a piece of tape or something over the light on your computer so that that light isn't coming right straight at you. And again, having those lights off to the side at about a 45-degree angle helps a lot.
That's a great suggestion. Does anybody else have any recommendations for glasses wearers?
Is it possible to tilt the screen down a little bit so that the reflection is not quite the same?
Ooh, that's a good idea. I could turn off my second monitor and tilt the screen back on the first one. That could totally work. I like that idea.
Well, another thought is in a contest, you're not going to be sitting at your computer. You're going to be standing and moving around. So I would mount the camera up at eye level when you're standing. Computers are still on and in the background, but they don't, the light's so far away from you at that point, that doesn't really factor in.
They're all wonderful suggestions. I think a couple other people had their hands up. Who else had a question? Jackie, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say that Eric did a speech about getting engaged to his wife. And early in the speech, he did this gesture like, "You're in good hands with Allstate." And so we always knew that in his hands, there was a box with a diamond ring in it. And every time he did that, we would be reminded about the diamond ring. I thought that was immensely clever.
Oh, absolutely. Eric does a wonderful job of incorporating different gestures into his speech. And I think that's where those, oh, Eric, don't be embarrassed. You're a fantastic speaker. And I think that's what makes those speeches, winning speeches, either contest speeches or winning your audience over, is making it memorable. And there's actually a blog about this. Somebody talked about how the winner of their district contest, not this district contest, but it was a different one, talked about having an allergy. And at the very end, she took an orange and put her EpiPen into the orange. And that created a very memorable ending for everybody. That actually ended up winning the district contest for them. I'm not sure how far the person went, but I'm sure they went quite far with that very memorable gesture. Repetition, as you mentioned, is another really good strategy as well. We have the green light. We can maybe do one or two more questions.
Carmen
Hey,
has her hand.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, go ahead. I wanted to speak. Keith, I saw your.
I think Carmen had a question first.
Okay. Oh, Carmen, your hand is raised?
No, I'm sorry. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, I'll go with mine. So just a quick question for you, Jenny. Hybrid meetings, should the person at the lectern, the speaker, look at the camera on the video device mostly, look at the physical audience mostly, or try to do a combination?
I would say look at, it depends on where they're at. If the person is in the live audience, I would say treat the camera like an audience member because you got people on the other side of the camera. If they're in, for instance, if I was in this room and there are people sitting around right now, I would give each person in the room some eye contact, but I'd also give all of you my eye contact as well. So treat the webcam like a member of your audience. All right. So unfortunately, we are at almost 8:10 Central Time, 9:10 Eastern Time. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for your participation and all of your feedback. We talked a lot about the importance of body language, how to use body language to make a connection, how to use body language in your speech, and how to use gestures in your speech. Thank you all for your participation, all of your enthusiasm, and all of your great answers. Thank you for all of you attending. It was great talking with all of you, and I hope to see you back here for the next workshop by Contest Mastery. Back to you, Toastmasters, Jim, and Keith.